The Love Life and Lose Weight podcast will teach you the art and science of changing your habits around food. I'm your host, advanced certified weight and life coach, Heather Beardsley. I've helped hundreds of women just like you figure out how to stop dieting, lose weight, and love life on the journey to goal weight and beyond. Hey, welcome to episode 48. This episode is on negative emotional fluency. That's not really clear, is it? I was trying to work out the title for this call in a way that it would be clear what I was talking about, and it was a little difficult to do. So let me just explain what I mean by this. I have a list of 8 of the top negative emotions. I know this podcast sounds like so much fun, doesn't it? And I want you to be able to be fluent in not only translating what those top negative emotions are trying to tell you, but to use emotions in your life. And the question is, like, what does this have to do with weight loss, right? Well, as you learn how to lose weight sustainably without restriction, what happens is we stop buffering our emotional experience with food, which means we stop eating to feel better. We stop eating to distract ourselves from feelings that we don't want to feel. And, this is hard work around habit change. But what happens in the negative space that's created when you do that is that you stop hiding from emotions when you stop eating over them or in reaction to them. And this leaves a vacuum where you need some tools and some skill sets to understand what the emotion is trying to tell you and also what to do after that. So, if you have not yet listened to my podcast called The F Word, go ahead and listen to that first. That has to do with the purpose of emotions and how to actually process them. Most of us just learn to kind of swallow our emotions or ignore them, or like we react to them. We lash out, or sometimes we just try to distract ourselves from them. We push them down and pretend they're not there, and we hope they go away. In my experience with yoga over the years, I've seen how the body stores emotion. It's kind of wild. In yoga class, for example, I think the hips are one of those places where emotional, negative emotional experiences can get stored. And when I've been in class with deep hip work, oftentimes there's sometimes spontaneous crying that will happen, or like a release. It's very common, but nonetheless, it can be a little disconcerting if you don't make the connection between movement in the body and memories and where they're stored. This can also happen with like heartbreak or grief, when in yoga class there are big heart opening, like chest opening postures, like back bends or camel pose, anything where you're sort of opening up your chest and your heart space area. Sometimes even like in back bends, when you have your head flexed all the way back and you even open up your throat area, this can release a lot of like emotional tension around staying quiet, not having a voice, not expressing yourself, being shut down, things like that. So, and it's interesting, isn't it? Like how the body and the mind and the memory are all sort of working together to figure out a way to move through life if you don't have a skill set of, first of all, how to be aware of your emotions. Number two, understand how they're created from within you by how you choose to think about the world. As I've discussed before, when we're young and we're just figuring out life, we just think we are our thoughts. But um, hopefully, at some point, we understand that there's a lot of automatic thinking that can happen. The episode 47, the one previous to this one, called Thought Leadership, goes over some of this automatic thinking that can happen. And it can be confusing, right? Because we have these different parts of our brain. Some parts of our brain have send up automatic thinking around parts of life that the brain is very concerned about that have to do with survival. So this has to do with eating and belonging and relationships and love and dieting, even, right? Because that has to do with food. So, and then there's the manager part of your brain, which is your prefrontal cortex, which is uniquely human. It's allowed us to evolve and more than any other species on Earth and create amazing things. And so we have these disparate parts of our brain. We have thoughts that are automatic. We have thoughts we think on purpose. And all of those thoughts are energy that's happening in the brain, and that we have this instrument called our body, which translates those energetic impulses that we experience as thoughts, and they get translated into a whole range of emotions in the body. Emotions are emotions, meaning energy in motion. And if you look at like the human machine from a very curious standpoint, like let's pretend David Attenborough, the famous David Attenborough, is talking about, the human species and its ability to think and its ability to feel. He might talk about how emotions are designed in the human machine to get the human's sentient awareness, their conscious awareness, to shake them sort of awake with big feelings, to let them know that maybe danger is there, or maybe something terrible has happened, like heartbreak, to pay attention, right? A lot of times we just feel like feelings happen because the world happens to us. But again, this is something that as we get more sophisticated in our thinking, as we evolve in our lives, we understand that emotions are unique to each person. It depends on how you think about something that creates the specific feeling that is attached to that particular resonance of your thinking. And so for negative emotions, it's important to understand what these are, these like top 8 negative emotions in weight loss, because so many of these in my work with clients my clients tell me are the reason why they eat when they're not hungry, or why they eat to a point where beyond like satisfaction till they're full. And this is what is responsible, this habit of like buffering your life with eating, buffering your emotional state with food to feel better, is an ineffective strategy for dealing with emotions, right? It's like we got the wrong idea kind of because of the beautiful way that food gives us dopamine in the brain, has a primal response in the body that sort of calms us and relaxes us just in a primal way. We've sort of used this tool of food to buffer us from our emotional experience, and we're not really translating the language of emotions in the way that they were sort of designed to be translated. So think about a translator. Let's say you're at the United Nations, right? If you've ever seen the United Nations come under session, all of the representatives from the country have, headphones. And so if somebody speaks in their language, there's translators that are translating what the speaker is saying and delivering that translated message to the UN representative in their home language. And if you think about the translator, it's really an art, it's not a science. Um, Maybe we've all seen scenes in movies where the translator doesn't want to get in trouble for saying something, translating something that um, will be received as upsetting, maybe by the person you're translating to. And so you might change the message a little bit, right? So that's sort of what happens when we eat to feel better, or we eat to distract ourselves from something that we don't feel great about. A lot of times this is called in the membership procrastination, right? In the mid-afternoon when it's time to go back to work and we don't feel like we want to, we sort of procrastinate by snacking. Procrastination. um, that's a form of emotional buffering. So we feel resistant to working, and so we snack to feel better. That's a seemingly like benign way of incorrectly translating the message, which is I'm resisting the work that needs to be done. And there's messages there for the honest translation of that message. And if we can kind of just taking that example, really get honest about what is the truth of this situation. If we stopped eating over that, what would that leave you with? Well, if every day you have this like dread for the last 2 or 3 hours of your workday, that you never feel motivated, you're always looking for a distraction with food, you kind of can't wait to go home. Well, the truth about that is you've got a habit of thinking about work that is very resistant. This could just be a habit of negativity, but it could be based in something that's maybe even a little bit deeper. Like maybe you're just not really being honest with yourself about how you feel about your job. I mean, do you want to be truly working at a job where you are thinking that way about it at the end of each day? And when you end your day in snacking and a lot of resistance and a lot of like difficult thinking about your job, how does that affect the rest of your life? Never mind your weight because you're eating all the time when you're not hungry. So there are hidden messages that need to be translated if you want to take responsibility for correctly translating the emotional big eight negative emotions that I see with my clients. They're trying to tell you something, and you may not be receiving the message. So I'm going to go over each one of them. And what I want you to do is kind of identify maybe your top three. If you have them, maybe you don't, that's fine too. But I want you to identify one that maybe feels really familiar to you that maybe you tend to eat over. And when I give you the translation of what the emotion is trying to tell you, I want you to journal over that and see with curiosity if there's any sort of receptivity there to what I'm saying. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But it's interesting on the other side of it. And I'll talk more about this after I go over the top 8. Okay. So let's start with the first one, which is anger. So if anger is a top level emotion for you, one that you are familiar with consistently, and for any one of these that you feel very familiar with, I want you to develop a relationship with the emotion that is one of acceptance that it's there because it's there because of how you're choosing to think about your life. Okay. Now, there might be some resistance to me saying this, but when you take responsibility for everything you choose to think, even if it feels automatic or super, super true that this is just a fact, then you can take emotional responsibility for how you feel. And then when you take that emotional responsibility for how you think and feel, then it puts you in the driver's seat of control as to what you want to do about that. So we're on number one, which is anger. So developing the relationship with anger, figure out where it lives in your body, just like that episode that I did called The F Word. It's episode 14, The F Word. Go and listen to that one. This is about how to actually feel it when you're in the anger. Okay. So that is the first thing that you need to do. I don't want you like really translating when you're in active anger, your nervous system for this negative emotion or any one of these. It needs to be processed before you can kind of translate after. Okay. So, this process I'm talking about of translating the secret language of negative emotions comes after the processing. So, go back to 14, learn how to process your emotions. And then after the emotions has become less intense and your nervous system feels regulated, you can write down the secret language of what it's trying to tell you. And anger always shows you what you're passionate about, where your boundaries and values are, and what you believe needs to change. So, all of these emotions, you can see they sort of hook into core beliefs about what you think are right and wrong about the world, who you see yourself to be, what kind of person you see yourself as, and how you're perceiving the world to be as well. And your passions, right? Like passion is a cousin to anger. Passion, you can't have anger if you don't feel in a particular way about something that resonates for you, right? Because apathy is the opposite of anger. Apathy is just not caring. So anger is definitely about your passion, what you care about, again, where your boundaries and values are and what you believe needs to change about the world. So you can just see in the last part of that translation of anger, it has to do with change. And this could be extrinsic to you, external to you. This could also be about how you think you need to change. It could be about how you think others should change. So this is going to butt right up against, let's say it has to do, maybe you're angry at what somebody else did and you don't think that they should have done something. And so it's going to butt right up against our limitations of control over others as well. So that can be sort of frustrating. And because we know we can try to control other people, but it never really works. And it's also exhausting. So we have influence over others. And we can communicate how we think things should change, what our boundaries are, what our values are, and why we believe so passionately about something that's made us angry. But we don't have control over other people, of course, only what we do within the dynamic that, whatever your anger is about. So that's the first one. The second one is disappointment. I see a lot of eating over disappointment in my work with weight loss. So disappointment is like, it's kind of in some ways, I think it can be tougher than anger because there's something about disappointment which is begging you to see the honest truth of life as it is. And it's kind of asking you to reconcile how you thought things should be with how things actually are. And of course, involves wishing things were different than they are. And that has directly to do with resistance. So, disappointment, the correct translation of it, it shows you that you tried for something, that you did not give in to not caring, that you do care, right? And that can be a really good thing because even if people disappoint you, I mean, I had this happen for me this week. It feels like a lump of ashes in my throat. It's terrible. Um, really letting it be there, your disappointment that you still care and that things aren't the way that you hoped that they would be. Um, it's telling you the truth of how things are and continuing to wish they were different than they are is like living in a fantasy land. And it's okay to hang out in disappointment for a while, but at some point the urging of disappointment is urging you to move past it, to accept people and things for who they are, the truth of that. And then you ask yourself, okay, what do I want to do in the wake of that? In the wake of how things are, in the wake of how um, that has worked out in the world, what do I want to do with that? And sometimes I get why, I mean, I really do. I get why we eat over these things because sometimes accepting how things are and the truth of it and maybe your unwillingness to kind of be with how things are requires you to make some really hard choices and decisions. Um, but you've just got to choose the discomfort that sort of moves you forward if you don't want to stay in disappointment. Spending your life wishing things were different. Is that how you want to spend your life? Okay, that's disappointment. The third one is anxiety. And, my general definition that I like to use for anxiety is resistance to what is. Anytime you're thinking in a way that is resisting how things are, I call it arguing with reality. So to translate anxiety, when you feel it, again, process it, locate it in your body, and then think back to like, how have I been resisting how things are? What is that about? And when you figure that out, you'll see that anxiety shows you that you need to wake up to what's true right now and that your work is being honest about how things are right now. If you're stuck in anxiety, it means that you are living in the past or you're living in fear of the future. You're not being accepting of what is right now. So that's sort of like ruminating on, I wish this didn't happen, or things shouldn't be this way. I wish they were different. You can see how anxiety and disappointment are sort of cousins. There's some of the same resonances in both of them. So anxiety is about waking up to present time consciousness of what is. Anytime we resist that, we're going to feel anxiety. And anxiety is designed to make you wake up, pay attention to the present moment because we can't change what's in the past. It's done. And we also can't live in the future. All we ever have is the ever present now, if you think about it. So, all of your agency for change, your agency to move your life forward, your agency to take responsibility for your life, to find a better feeling now, resists in first accepting what is. And when you can truly open up to what is, no matter how difficult it might be, your ability to feel better will follow that. So that's number 3. Number 4 is bitterness. So bitterness shows where you need to heal and where you're still holding judgment of others and yourself. Bitterness sort of is another way of describing righteous indignation. Where I often say righteous indignation or bitterness is like so seductive. It's so hard to resist because our judgments, they seem very like righteous, right? But it's sort of like trying to drink from an empty well. Like you just can't subsist on it. There's nothing there for you. Um, there's a healing that is there for you when you let go of the bitterness and your judgments about others and yourself. Again, coming into the present now is where you can do that, because as long as you hang out in the past or you're thinking like about the uncertain future, which nobody knows about, it feels terrible. So healing and coming into integrity with yourself is always possible from a place of bitterness. And that path is not an easy one, but it is there for you. It is there for everybody to find if you find yourself in bitterness or righteous indignation. It's sort of like a laying down of arms is always on the other side of bitterness. But sometimes we just need to drink from that bitterness enough to really realize that you might want more. So if you do, try to find where the healing might be in the present moment, and notice how the judgments don't actually serve you in your desire to feel better, if that's there for you. Okay. If you don't want to feel better and you want to keep the bitterness, that is 100% okay and up to you. I'm not saying through any of these that there is some kind of agenda for you to drop any of these. In fact, it's actually the opposite. There's two sides to every negative emotion. One is the contrasted experience that created it, the difficulty of life, right? Which nobody gets a pass from. And we can't feel these negative emotions unless we also know what's on the other side of them. So they're like the yin and the yang. They're two sides of the same coin. And to have a fully expressed human life, we have to hang out in both of those sides. We kind of have to marinate in bitterness once in a while to really understand what that experience is about and decide truly, like from a place of responsibility and willingness, whether you want to move past it or not. Okay, let's see. We're on number 5 is resentment. So the message of resentment, to translate it in maybe a way that you hadn't thought of, think about resentment in your life. Where do you resent others? I can think of a few. Isn't resentment just, it's a tricky one, is it shows up in so many small little ways and it makes little piles in your life, I find. But just like cleaning up an area that's full of like piles, it kind of can really clean things up in your life and create a sense of like order from the mess. So to translate resentment, you want to try to understand it in a way that it's showing you where you're living in the past and not allowing the present to be as it is. Because we can't resent from the future. You notice that like the future hasn't happened yet. And resentments are always living in the past, because even if it's 2 seconds ago, right? But there's sort of this like repeating motif of resentment where it'll just pop up. I hate when you do that. You always say this. Why are things always so hard for me? When we say that, we're like resenting our own life. So resentments are like we kind of collect them like this little collection of pain. Um, so it shows us how past focused we are. And we know that when we're focused in the past, we can't evolve our life to the next iteration. And the truth is, we always have to be evolving past what happened and moving toward the future. And, our habit brains, they just don't like to do that. And that's just something that's like part of the machine that's built in. We're not going to want to move boldly into the future because it's the unknown. Sometimes it's easier to hang out in resentment and nurse our wounds, and be a victim. But again, like bitterness, how often, how long, and how often you want to stay there. Just notice those piles. Do you have too many resentment piles? Maybe it's time to get in there and clean them up if you want to feel better. Okay. So we're on number 6 is guilt. Guilt shows that you're still living a life in other people's expectations of what you should do. I'm going to read that again. Guilt shows you that you're still living life in other people's expectations of what you should do. So sometimes, like, some of my mommy clients, they'll be like, I just feel guilty for taking the time to make my plan every morning when I should. There's the expectation. Should always shows an expectation of conditioning that we've taken on from society about the rightness or wrongness of how we live our lives or our actions. And so when we take those honest facts, we will experience guilt when we don't meet up to the expectation that we've internalized as correct. And, this is a great opportunity to wake up to your conditioning that you've maybe just unwittingly taken on without really looking at things. And this is where you get to kind of reprogram and recondition or reorder what are the expectations of my life. In my 50s, for sure, I have different expectations of myself, my relationships, my friendships than I used to in my 30s. And I think that's true for everybody as we go through our lives. We need to kind of reassess expectations of ourselves and others as we move through our lives and as we evolve in our relationship with ourselves and others. So, guilt is going to wave a red flag to let you know that whatever the object of your guilt is reflective of other people's expectations. It's an invitation to just sort of internalize them if you want to. Like sometimes we want to feel guilty when we're not acting in alignment with our own values. We want that. And we want to keep our own values. And we want to say, I don't like the way that makes me feel. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to use the morning to be there with my kids, and I'm going to plan my meals the night before after they're in bed. And that just might be right for you. But when guilt is about, like, when it runs counter to how you truly want to run your life, that's a great opportunity for you to do a reassessment of your own expectations for you and your life. And you create the expectations, you create the conditioning, you create the manifesto of, like, this is how I feel about my life, and this is what I want to do, and this is what I don't want to do. Okay. All right. The next one is discomfort. So if you're feeling uncomfortable, like really uncomfortable, let's say you're at the kitchen table and there's an argument and you feel really uncomfortable and you feel tempted to overeat because you don't like the feeling in your body. Maybe there was a lot of arguing at the table. Maybe you just don't like it. Like, um, you know, when you want to translate discomfort, you can use it to show you that you need to pay attention right now to what's happening because you're being given the opportunity to change or to do something different than what you typically do. Okay. So, a lot of times we stay in uncomfortable situations because it's just what we've always done, or it's what we've always seen our family of origin sort of model for us. And we just sort of just take on those actions and we forget that we have agency and we have choice and we can do things differently. That's what discomfort is really trying to get you to notice. And, like, be honest about, like, if you don't like hearing other people argue at the table, you can get up and leave. You don't have to subject yourself to that. And your nervous system will really thank you for it. people may be surprised if you all of a sudden get up from the table if you don't like the tone of the conversation. Let's say it's political, maybe it's uncomfortable. You don't want to see people getting their feelings hurt. It's just not something you're good with. So you can change that dynamic. You can state a boundary which says, like, hey, this is what I'm going to do if I get in this uncomfortable situation from now on. And that's a way for you to kind of like be a really good manager of you. Sometimes we want to stay in discomfort, even though it's hard for us, because it matters to us to be present in an uncomfortable situation. And that's fine too. But just know that you have a choice in these situations. And when you choose from a place of willingness and like intention to stay or go or change or what have you, right? You can sort of own it as your own choice rather than just sort of sitting in discomfort because you think you should. Or that's what good moms do, or this is what a good wife does, sort of thing. A lot of times I say, like, why are you going to a party that you're complaining about that is uncomfortable for you to go to? Well, my husband expects me to go. And it's like, okay, well, you have the opportunity to change that or not. And let's not do it because of other people's expectations. Let's either go to the party or not because it's also right for you. And for whatever reasons you do it for, that they're right for you. And see, when you take responsibility for that, it just becomes much easier and that discomfort will go down. Okay. The last one is sadness. So, sadness, when you translate it in a way that helps evolve you, it shows you the depth of your feeling and the depth of your care for others and this world. And, in this way, sadness can be like a very beautiful thing, even though it's heart wrenching sometimes. We are designed to have feelings about the world, our attachments to it, right? Our attachments to others, the way that we create meaning in the world is it's the how can I say this? It's the high note of our life, right? And so whatever we love, whatever we've created, whatever we care about, the again, the other side of the coin for that is the sadness of um, losing it potentially. And it's both this human life. Because we can't have wonderful love and attachment without also knowing that nothing is guaranteed. And so a lot of times with sadness, we don't really want to change it until maybe it changes on its own. But it's just good to know. I often say this even on weigh-in day with my clients. A lot of my clients weigh in on Friday. And when they have a disappointing weigh-in, they think that's a bad thing. And I always say, like, no, it's a good thing. It means that, like, you still care about losing weight. Like, of course you're disappointed. Of course you're sad. This means a lot to you. I want to see that you're sad, that the scale didn't show you what you were hoping and expecting. Because if you didn't care, then that would be a problem. If you have the wrong coach, right? Go find something that you do care about, right? And this is the whole thing about all of these emotions, is that when they're true for you, that it means that you're attached to something that's meaningful to you. And from that place of awareness of the feeling, what it's truly about, you have choices and agency as a human being to, like, either stay with that feeling or try to find a way to reconcile this feeling with acceptance at a minimum. Or if you want to move beyond it, listen to the translated meaning of what the emotion is trying to tell you. Okay, so I hope that this has been helpful to you. Again, your coach homework is to identify, of the 8 negative emotions, which 1 to 3 do you sort of have a lot of familiarity with? And in your journaling, whatever it's about, your anxiety, bitterness, resentment, guilt, discomfort, sadness, or disappointment or anger, um, what is it trying to tell you? Can you translate your emotion into something that is helpful, that the emotion is trying to tell you something about your life? We're designed to feel these emotions just as much as all the positive emotions. We have 100% responsibility, the opportunity to take responsibility for these emotions by how we choose to think about our life. And their purpose is to kind of tell the truth of your experience by how you're choosing to think about the world, and just own that. Instead of being a victim to negative feelings, you can own it by taking responsibility for, creating that feeling with how you choose to think and feel about the world. Like, let's say, you're someone in your family dies and your negative emotion is grief. Like, of course you want to feel grief. Grief is important to feel, and you want to feel that fully because it's representative of how much you care about somebody, what the relationship meant to you. It's something that's ours to move through and, just be with as long as it takes. We would never want a free pass out of guilt. And for any of these emotions, like I said, it's up to you. But the thing I don't want you doing is eating over these emotions. I want you feeling the full, like, honest translation of what these feelings are trying to tell you about your life and your world, and see if there is just a door there, like just a door for you to open up into a new experience from that, the truth of that emotion. Like, what is there for you to take if you want to? That's how, when you take away the eating to feel better, what you're left with is an emotional experience that is trying to teach you about the truth of your life, the responsibility you have for it, and then your agency to either evolve with it, stay with it, or like change it if you want to. And this is where, like, the most meaningful experiences in our life can come from some of the most painful emotions. Like I said, like this disappointment. Um, I want to feel it because it's representative of how much I, you know, care about things. I care about the people in my life. I care about, my history with them. But I think, in some ways, for some of my relationships, it's just time to kind of just let it be what it is, and know that, like, I don't want to be disappointed if that's the best that somebody can do. You know, that's not fair to them, and it's not fair for me. So, some of this is hard work. This is why it's always easier to eat. But at the end of your life, eating over negative emotions will never have taught you about you and the potential to create meaning from painful emotions. I always go back to Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And that's what he found, from the people he observed in the concentration camps in World War II, that the ones who survived the worst emotional um, situation that you could possibly think of, the ones who went on to live full lives, meaningful lives, they made meaning from their pain. They made it mean something personal for their lives. They made what they had been through mean something. So, how can you make meaning from these negative emotions that maybe you sometimes grapple with, like me? How can you turn it from something heavy and negative into something that you get to carry forward into your life that means something about what you've been through or who you want to be, or both? Okay. So, that's how to translate emotions to learn what's needed from your experience rather than just eating over it. I hope it's been helpful. journal on this and see what you come up with. Visit me on the reel on Instagram at Thrive in Midlife and let me know your insights, your ahas, your takeaways, what have you. If you are interested, the Love Life and Lose Weight book is available on Amazon on Kindle. Just a few more weeks, it will come out in paperback. I've just uploaded the paperback transcript and it takes a few weeks. So just continue to stay patient. I know many of you are patiently waiting for the paperback, and I will let you know as soon as it's out. Okay, so stay focused and so long. Hey, if this episode was helpful, then let's connect. Visit hbeardsley.com/subscribe. That's HBEARDSLEY.com/subscribe. You'll get a gift from me, exclusive subscriber content, and advanced notice of in-person events.